30,000. Big. 21 target north, boom stack 36,000, 13,000. Bang. 40 scope, short skate, hot, right.
This is the Be One Change One podcast, where our mission is to help listeners define values, practice integrity, and inspire change.
Our vision is to mentor men and empower them to achieve more by taking responsibility for shaping their own lives.
He's Cass, an evolving man who has been shaped by adversity and continues to grow through his imperfections.
And he's Roscoe, an imperfect work in progress that tries to suck less every day.
Between us, we have over 40 years of Air Force fighter pilot experience with countless hours as trainers, instructors, and mentors.
Join us and learn to take responsibility for your own life as we dive into subjects from leadership to resilience to vulnerability.
Be the one who changes their course. Be decisive, driven, and purposeful. Set the example for others. Lead. We wish we'd had this show when we were younger men.
Be the one.
Kind of uncomfortable silence sitting there.
Yeah, it is.
At least we didn't. At least we didn't sit there and make meaningful eye contact the whole time.
That would have been
a little creepy. All right, dude, I don't have a funny story or anything even really cool. One thing I did notice, though, is that these two nerds have computers out and I've got nothing. So here, I'll hold my phone and act intelligent.
That's fine.
So this is going to be the Cass and Aleishia show talking about,
We're going to talk today about empathy and validation. So we thought this was important to talk about because for a couple of reasons. One is the word empathy gets thrown around a lot. And, you know, we've even talked about it on the podcast, but we're going to try to drill down more into what exactly it is and what does empathy mean? How do we express it? Things like that. And then, you know, just on the last podcast that you and I recorded, we were talking about validation.
Yeah,
and
a little
the
bit.
importance of validation to a certain extent. So I just thought this would be a good opportunity to kind of drill down on both empathy and validation. And Aleishia is really smart on both of these. So she's our guest again for this one.
Skip the formal intros because she's old hat now.
Yeah, and the validation's really important too because it's so important in relationships, right? It's very important in how we approach relationships, especially, you know, with a significant other or a partner and things like that. So the other reason that I really wanted to go into these two too, though, is because I think they set the stage nicely for when we do have our follow-on podcast down the road around emotional intelligence. I think it'll set a really good framework for our discussion around that for the listeners. So with that said, I'll turn it over to Aleishia.
Yeah, turn it over to the pro.
And so we can.
Close enough?
I don't know. Yeah, just stay close.
A little bit more. You can angle that thing up too. So
yeah, you got it.
Yeah, there you go.
There you go.
Lean into it.
Okay.
Hey, oh, and by the way, don't get distracted by the muscles of John Cena. Over there.
Yes, so John Cena is our mascot.
He's a little bit ripped.
No,
I mean, he's got definition in his pecs. Check that out.
I know his
That's
pecs
pretty
have
cool.
pecs,
but you can't see him. It says right there, you can't see me.
You can't see me.
So
awesome.
It's pretty badass.
Skip leg day.
He needs a B1
No,
change
he
one
did
hat.
not
We're gonna have to
skip
change
leg
that.
day.
We're gonna get a Sharpie and turn that into a B1 change one
Yeah,
hat.
I like that.
There you go.
Get him a B1 change one muscle tank top. Like
Like a pump shirt. Yeah, there you go.
All right, we're already way off topic.
Sorry, what were we talking about today, John Cena?
No, but we've talked about with your audience, and we've had conversations before about couples, relationships, some of the challenges with conflict and how important validation is and how difficult it can be. So it's kind of one of those things like it's easy, but it's really difficult. And I've noticed with couples I've worked with, it's very difficult for them to grab a hold of it and actually practice it. But it's so powerful because you're literally just telling somebody that I see them, I see your experience. I get what you're saying, and that person just feels heard, and so much of that just can de-escalate things.
Yeah.
Hey, so I'm going to pretend just for a second that probably many of our listeners are like me, and they don't really understand some of the vocabulary that we're going to use here. So, can we just put some definitions or just some plain English on some of this?
That's a great point, Roscoe, because that's another reason why I wanted to start or why I wanted to do a podcast on this stuff. Because when we had Aleishia on last time, we were talking about shame and shame resiliency. One of the things that we talked about was emotional literacy.
Yeah.
And I think for men in particular, but I think for people in general, we're not all very emotionally literate, you know, and so understanding what these things actually mean and then tying some definitions to them is really important. So let's start with empathy, and I'll let you take it over.
Okay. I just have this lingering cough, by the way, too, that's never going to go away. So what am I doing? Am I differentiating empathy from validation?
Just give us what is empathy?
Okay.
Plain English definition so that dummies like me can understand what we're talking about for the next hour.
So how I would explain empathy to somebody is you are connecting with the underlying emotion that somebody is expressing. That is what empathy is. Validation is not that. It could be a part of validation, but empathy is like, you tell me that, let's just say you tell me you're going through divorce and I've never been through a divorce. I might have to dig down deep inside of me and go, well, what does it feel like to have loss in my life? And I might look at you and go, God, that sounds like a really big loss in your life. And you might go, yeah, it is, or you might go, no, it's not. Like, I'm excited, whatever. Right. But it's connecting with the underlying emotion. That's empathy. And I'll give a quick other difference. We'll hear people go like, I'm really empathic. Some people can be sensitive to emotion, more sensitive to emotion. And that's true. And that can either be because they're hypervigilant. Maybe they're more sensitive in general, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking on using a tool, a deliberate tool to sit down and basically say, I see your experience. I can hold space for your experience. And I'm here with you. So that's what empathy is.
Yeah.
Is that kind of the same thing as just, trying to feel like I understand what you're talking about? Like I'm trying to put myself in your shoes kind of thing?
I'm going to say yes and no.
Okay.
Because yes, it is. We are trying to see things we're trying to take perspective. That's part of the skill. We are trying to take that person's perspective, but we don't have to put ourselves in their shoes because it's really about, if you've experienced loss, if you've experienced grief, if you've experienced most emotions, right, you're going to be able to connect with another person on an emotional level. So like I said, I don't necessarily have to put myself in your shoes of like what one of you's experienced to maybe connect with what that emotion feels like. That's just kind of more being nuanced about it. But
well, you call it nuanced. I'm just trying to understand, I guess, on a non-scientific level, something I can think about day to day. You know what I mean? I've never been divorced before. Mm-hmm. And if a buddy of mine comes up and says, I'm getting a divorce, that was the example that you threw out there. It's very tough for me to be able to put myself in his shoes, but I can probably associate that he's probably sad or he's upset or he has this feeling of loss or something like that. And I may not be able to relate it to something in my own relationships, but I don't know, maybe I lost a dog or something like that made me feel similar to the way that he might be feeling. Yeah. Is that kind of where you're going with it?
You're spot on. Yep. You got it.
That's a bingo.
So here's a question, because I think empathy and sympathy sometimes get used in similar veins. And so can you explain the difference between empathy and sympathy?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So empathy is feeling with you, right? I see you. I am here with you. Sympathy is like, I see you over there. I'm not with you, but like, I feel sorry for you. I feel bad for you. And I think, I don't know about you two, but growing up, sympathy was kind of the word we throw around, or here's a sympathy card, right? So I think that can be a hard one for people to wrap their heads around, but recognizing sympathy, right? When we practice that, like, I feel really sorry for that person, or that's really hard on them, that might be more sympathy versus I'm sitting here with you, being with you in your pain, being with you in your loss or your excitement or your disappointment or whatever. Versus going, oh, that's too bad. I feel sorry for you. Like, they say, bless your heart, right? Like the Southern term, bless your heart's kind of I'm not
a sympathetic response.
Yeah, but
you know what? It's
that can also be a dig as well.
Yeah, it is.
Depending on where you are regionally in the United States, if somebody says bless your heart, that may not be a compliment.
Yeah, and kind of the reverse that she was talking about. Maybe somebody's really excited. You were sharing on a previous episode when you got selected to go to officer training school. There was this whole group of guys that were just...
They were not exactly happy for me.
Not happy for you, right? And and maybe they were showing you quote unquote sympathy, like, oh, well, good luck, or, oh, well,
I would have probably taught another emotion.
Sucks to be you, kind of a thing. Or the difference would be like when we were in the squadron together, you come into my office and maybe you're having an issue with one of the boys at home that you want to talk about, and you close the door and we start talking. Most of the time, I would hope that when we had those conversations, we stayed in that communication and connection with each other, right? And shared stories. And similar experiences, instead of me just going, man, that really sucks. You ready to go get lunch?
Well, you know what, that brings up an interesting point, though, is you and I, our stories were parallel in a lot of ways.
They were.
You were having conversations about what was going on in your life, and I was having conversations about my life, and they were almost similar mirror images of each other, maybe slightly, change a few details here and there. But here's one thing. I mean, like families and people in general, kids in general, they're all about the same. Everybody's dysfunctional. Everybody sucks. All kids suck, and we figured that out sitting there having Jack and Cokes. You would tell me stories and you would vent about some things, and I would tell you stories and vent about some things. But when we walked away, you kind of go, man, I mean, it's kind of all the same shit.
We're all in it together.
All right. Well, but that brings me to a point here, back to Aleishia, is how do you express empathy for something that you don't have experience in? How do you kind of get into the practice of this? Like, it was easy for us because we had shared experiences, maybe slightly different, but we could relate on a certain level. But like you going out and tending to your horses, and something happens out there, I can't necessarily relate to that. Mm-hmm. How do you practice that?
Okay, so empathy is a skill like anything else, and it's you just want to be cognizant of when you're using it, right? We don't walk around being empathetic with everybody every day of the week, right? It's a tool we use. So there's 5 things. One, you want to take perspective. So you want to try to take the other person's perspective. So basically, not necessarily getting in their shoes, but just getting out of your own head, your own experiences. The other one is staying out of judgment. So we're not judging what's happening for that person. We're just listening. It comes back to we're trying to identify the underlying emotion. So if I'm telling you something about my horse, like this happened last summer, my horse came up really lame and needed some major stuff done, which meant I couldn't ride him for several months. And it was pretty upsetting, right? You might recognize loss in there, right? I recognize maybe having an injury and not having to work out, or having a goal set that I can't accomplish. And you might say, hey, that sounds like you're suffering a really big loss right now, because you're connecting with the underlying emotion. Now, you might get it wrong. You might go, oh my God, it sounds like you might be really pissed off about that. And I might go, no, I'm just really sad. That's okay. It's okay to get the emotion wrong.
Yeah, really frustrated.
Yep. It's okay, because the other person, because that's the goal. The other person is going to come back and correct us. That's okay. That's okay. That's what we want. So we want to take perspective, stay out of judgment, identify the emotion, and then communicate the emotion to the other person. The other big part of this, and so a lot of this, right, I'm getting from my work through Brené Brown, is mindfulness. We want to be mindful of when we're practicing empathy. So I might experience this more with the kids when I'm trying to be empathetic with the kids, but we don't want to jump in that big dark hole somebody's in, right? So if I am like sitting in front of you crying and just really upset and something really bad's happened, like, you're not wanting to jump in the hole with me, right? Because now you can't separate yourself from the problem anymore. It's like we want to stay mindful of not over-identifying with emotion, not over-identifying with thoughts, and staying present versus, that way we can extend a rope and help the person and stick our hand in and be like, here, let me help you up if you need it. But we're not sucked into the same hole that they're in, if that makes sense.
It does. Can I jump around for a little bit? Because I read over y'all's notes that you had on there, and I think this was down in the validation section, but it said something about stop trying to be a problem solver. And the example that you just used, you said you don't want to get sucked down in the hole so that you can help solve the problem. So now I see incongruency in the two. So how would you practice the empathy but not try to solve the problem at the same time?
So let me back up on that a little bit in terms of what this might look like, and then we'll kind of jump into that. Yeah. So this might look like the story the person's telling me is very triggering to a story that I haven't worked through, right? Like, let's say the person had to put an animal down, and I'm like, holy shit, I just put my animal down last year and I'm still raw from it, right? So I need to be cognizant, right, that I'm not all of a sudden now I'm crying and I'm not providing empathy for them, but now I'm so caught up in their story that now I'm sucked into the story and I'm no longer a present person. So that's how I'm speaking to it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's not about problem solving when you're extending empathy to somebody. That to me, that goes back to the perspective taking to a certain extent, because when you're doing the perspective taking, what you're trying to do is kind of remove yourself from whatever's going on. Like the last thing you want to do when you're trying to be empathetic with somebody is go, oh, dude, I feel you. You want to hear my story about when this happened to me?
Oh, yeah.
And
Shit the bigger turd.
Yeah,
Yeah.
And, you know, like my story is so much worse than yours. You know, you don't
I fall into that trap pretty bad.
You know, so that's the perspective taking, and where you just kind of step back, take the pause that we've talked about, kind of take a pause, and then don't get into judgment over it and go, well, it sounds like you made a lot of stupid fucking decisions when you did that, you know, or sounds like you could have picked a better partner when you did that. You know, do you want to kind of avoid those types of things? I see you laughing.
No, this is hard for us though, man, because we're
problem solvers.
Well, but I mean, you and I specifically, and the community that we grew up in, we are trained to give blunt, Brutus, honest feedback.
Yeah, we are.
You know, and sometimes it comes in the form of, dude, you made 100 fucking bad decisions, and that's why you died today.
And there may be a time to have that conversation with that person, but when you're in that moment with them, that's not the time to do it.
Yeah. Right? Well, okay. So you got a wingman, and you're at red flag, and you've been training to go to red flag for 3 months, doing these missions over and over and over again. And day one, night one of red flag, he goes out there and he bombs the wrong target, frats his flight lead, and then he dies. He has, just a really bad day. And you can tell when you get back into the building that this guy is just beating himself up, right? Because he's a colossal failure on the grand stage of red flag. But when you go into the debrief, you're going to debrief that dude, and you're going to get in his face about it and say, hey, man, here's the 3 things that you fucked up, and here's how you can not fuck them up again.
Right.
You know, and it'd be very hard to pull that guy aside in that moment and go, hey, man, dude, it's, you know,
not the time,
two,
not the place.
Yeah, 2 things, right? There's a time and place for it. Like Alicia's saying, we're not just walking around going, oh, can I identify?
Let's go to the bar and
get some how you're feeling right now.
Yeah.
No, but similar situation in a squadron, getting ready to go down range. I'm evaluating a guy who's been struggling. He's been messing things up for months now. Nobody knows what the fuck's going on. We get into the debrief. We got sent home. He busted the airspace too many times. We got sent home. I didn't even bring him up initial at Nellis. I was so pissed off. So we get to the debrief, dude, and I'm ready. You know, I've got the litany of things in my mind that I'm going to lay on this cat. And we start going through the debrief, and I don't know what it was, but I just recognized at some point that there was something bigger going on for this guy.
Yeah.
And so I just went, look, dude, time out. Right? Debrief's over for right now. What the fuck's going on? Like, what is going on for you right now? Is there something that we don't know about? Is there something else that's drawing your attention away? Because you're a qualified F-16 cat.
Yeah.
You know, and you can't do the small things right now. Like, and you've been in the jet for 2 years operationally. Like, what is going on? You know, and turns out hadn't told anybody, and a bunch of shame around some things, but having a ton of problems at home, worried about going down range and what that means when he comes back, if his wife's even going to be there, if his kids are going to be there. Like, he's got all this other stuff that's going on in his life that nobody knew about because nobody had stopped for a second to ask the question.
Yeah.
You know, and so.
Well, that's not exactly encouraged, you know, in that environment.
But, you know, that's where we can show that empathy in those situations.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
No, it makes complete sense.
Yeah.
And, you know, we were going back to what Aleishia was saying about how, you know, sometimes it's hard, especially in a community like that, you know, to put the exact language on some things. And it's like, you know, going out and working on your car. If you don't work on cars regularly, then you don't know the nomenclature. When I say, you know, let's go change the alternator or the, you know, canoodler valve or whatever it may be, if you're not familiar with that language, then you don't know what the hell I'm talking about.
Exactly.
You know?
So, and I think that what's important too is that perspective taking and that stepping. That's the space that when she talks about creating space, and back me up, I might be wrong with this, but that's the creating space piece of it too, right? You're not trying to problem solve. You're not trying to figure anything out for them. You're just there with them. Does that make sense? You're just going, look, dude, I get it. And, you know, it feels like you're experiencing a great amount of frustration or loss or grief or whatever it is right now. And I'm here with you.
Yeah.
Like, I get it. And I'm here with you. That's it.
Yeah. And it may be really quick. And we have to remember too, like, this is the antidote to shame, right? So somebody's coming to us with something really shaming, which, remember, people don't generally tell us something shaming. If we can apply that empathy for that antidote, like, you're not alone. You're not the only one who's experienced this. But again, right? Yeah. And you both brought up a good thing. Empathy misses. We all do them, like the one-upping or rank ordering suffering or right or judgment, or there's like 6 or 7 of them, and we do it all the time.
Yeah.
But like, again, right? What's our value? What's our goal? What's the time? What's the place? Can we just stop and, hey, that sounds really difficult. Sounds like you're really struggling. Then it just opens up a whole different, if that's what the person wants to do, have a conversation. Now it's open the door for it. But empathy moves pretty quick. We don't stay in it for, do you know what I mean? Like, we're not kumbayaing around stuff. We're like,
no, I get that. And I think that, one thing that I take away from what you just said is we talk about communication a lot on the podcast and how it's a two-way street. And it's not only, dictating and talking to someone or a group or whatever, but it's also listening and taking feedback. And, who was it? Was it Seneca, the ancient Stoic philosopher, that said you have 2 ears and one mouth for a reason, listen twice as much as you talk. So when you're talking about that, it's to get into that shit the bigger turd kind of analogy, that's a trap that I fall into, because it's not that I'm not listening to you, but my brain works like a Rolodex. And when you start telling me a story, my brain automatically goes into Rolodex mode and goes, ding, there's a story that matches your story. And maybe it's not a better story, but it's still a story. You know what I mean? Like, you're telling me a story of you had this kid that was having a bad day. Well, dude, I have a story like that too. And maybe it's not trying to shit the bigger turd, but it's trying to relate or connect. There you go. That's the word I was looking for. See, smart people.
No, but it's spot on, because this goes into other stuff, but sometimes we try to hotwire connection, or we try to get in connection by doing that. I mean, I'm guilty of that. And again, it's just time, place. What's our goal with this person? What are we doing? Somebody, do you know what I mean? Somebody meaningful, like your wife or your kids, you might take that time to have an empathetic response versus, I got a story like that, I can totally relate.
Or going into problem solving mode.
Yeah.
Well, we do this. This is almost a daily conversation at our house. Katie will wake up, and this is for example, she'll wake up and she'll be like, oh, I slept like shit last night. And I'll be like, yeah, me too. I only got like 6 hours. Instead of saying that, I could probably say something like, man, I'm sorry. That really sucks. You're going to have a bad day.
Why are you looking at me?
Whoa, did I hit a nerve? Hold up.
Sounds like our conversation.
Hey, John Cena, a referee. You guys fight. Feats of strength. Here we go.
Super drink off.
But that's a great example. That is a great example. So, yeah. And again, it's just right. What are your goals?
Yeah. Well, I have to internally, I catch myself a lot of times before I say that. I fail at it miserably, but I try to say, this is not a contest. I literally will say that into my head a lot of times. And even, I'll tell Katie something that maybe I had a bad day or something that went on in my day. I'll tell her, and she'll come in, she'll immediately come back with trying to shit the bigger turd. And I'll just look at her and be like, let's not turn this into a contest. It's not a contest. There's
a great example of being on the other side of it. Right. And sometimes when we're on the other side of it, it's like, I just wanted somebody to hear me or just relate to me. But and that can take us into validation, actually.
Well, hold on a second, though, because what I want to say is, one, don't overthink this. Like what we're talking about seems complicated, but it really isn't. So that's the first thing I want to say. The second thing I want to say is, you're not doing this with everybody all the time. So going back to your squadron example, even though I gave an example of a time that happened for me in a squadron, that happened for me in a squadron like twice in a 20-year career, right? Yeah. So there's a time and place. And in a debrief, probably not the place to worry about underlying feelings and emotions and shit sort your shit out, man, because we got things
because there's a standard that you're expected to uphold, and you're for whatever reason you're not upholding that standard.
Yeah, there's a time and place for it for sure. And then 3, it's a practice. It's something that you have to just try to be mindful of to a certain extent, and then start to recognize when you should apply it and when you shouldn't. If you got a really good friend or a partner that comes to you that's upset about something, probably a good time to try to exercise this, and practice it a little bit, versus maybe you just got a coworker at work who's pissed off because, he's at work.
Well, she even said it's a skill.
Yeah,
right?
It's totally a skill.
And just like any other skill, if you're trying to get better at public speaking or storytelling or whatever it is, then you have to practice that kind of stuff. If you're trying to get better at drawing, then you need to practice drawing.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, what do people want to do? They want to be seen, right? They want to be heard. They want to be seen.
Yeah.
And this goes, had like some little notes here that I think we're actually sharing. So a lot of times, like, we don't do these things because, right, we might worry about we're going to say the wrong thing. We don't know what we're going to say. It's nervous, like we're nervous being in that connection. Maybe we don't want to hear what the other person has to say, right? So we're like, I don't want to hear this. And it's okay to, again, try to identify that underlying feeling and then just ask the person, what do you need? How can I support you? Do you need space? Because it's also important for the other person. I think this is probably getting off topic. And I feel this, I don't want to stereotype, but I feel this for men, that there's this expectation that men are supposed to do so much in relationships when your partner, whatever, man, woman, whatever side you're on, they also need to say what they need, right? Hey, no, thanks for asking me. I just need space right now. Or, hey, can you just give me a hug? I don't really need to talk about it, but thank you. Or, versus the partner trying to guess what the person needs. So, that's just the other person's responsibility on top of it. But
yeah, and that's a great point because maybe I've done this in the past, and an example that I'll give is, maybe you've got a friend that comes to you that you're close with who's really struggling with something, or maybe they've made a decision that's carrying a lot of shame for them, or having a real big impact in your life. Well, if they feel safe enough to share that with you, even though they're worried about maybe how you might judge them or see them after they tell you about it, one of the best things that you can do is take that perspective taking and then hold space, be non-judgmental, and then just go, hey, dude, I'm not sitting here thinking you're a bad person. I'm wondering what's the best way I can support you through this.
Yeah. Well, we've talked about a few times about not having the words, not having, like we talked about earlier, we talked about the vocabulary, not being able to put a finger on it or use the right words. So maybe sometimes plain English is just the best. Like, dude, I don't know. I don't really know what to do here. I can't validate your feelings if I don't know how to express those, or I can't relate to it in some way, So yeah, what do you need? What can I do for you? You want a hug? You want to go for a walk?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep. That's it.
Like,
man.
if you come to me and you're complaining about a headache, I'll kick you in the knee. Then,
and your knee will hurt.
Then your knee will hurt, and maybe you'll stop thinking about your head hurting.
But, yeah, exactly.
So back to something that you said earlier, you were talking about, one of the notes that I just wrote down here is how do you go about expressing empathy or doing empathy? I don't even know what the right words are. Is this a verb? Is this an action? I don't know. But
verb.
How do you be empathetic to a person that doesn't emote? Like, I tend to be maybe a little more stoic and I don't talk about my feelings a lot. So how would somebody be empathetic to a person like that?
We're actually slipping a little bit into validation here, but that's okay. And I won't jump into validation.
It's my show. At least 50% my show. I don't care. I'm the assistant podcast manager. So
it's reading between the lines. So, and I say this with caveat, however it's pronounced, because typically you don't want to mind read, right? I don't want you to sit there and go, or you more so, like, you should know what I'm thinking, right? You should have known that, like bad juju for relationships. Don't want that. But like, if I notice something's off, or I know something's going on in your life, right? And I'm sitting here going, for most people that could be XYZ, I might just check in. Hey, I know this is going on for you right now, and I can only imagine it could be XYZ. And you could go, yep. Or you could go, nope. Or you could go, I'm not really prepared to talk about it. Right. But again, it's just that, right? It's not perfect. We're people. It's just,
this is something I think women are much better at than men.
Yeah.
Because women will get together. Katie does this all the time. She'll get together with her girlfriends, go to lunch and spend 4 hours just talking and, bitching about their day or their husbands or their jobs or whatever it might be. And they get that stuff out. Guys, I don't think do a great job of that. Like, when's the last time we got up a bunch of bros and just went out and had dinner and talked about things?
Yeah.
What's going on in your life, man? Like, how you doing? How you feeling? We don't do that very often, at least in my circle of friends. We don't. Maybe others do. I think it was easier maybe when we were in a fighter squadron because it was a closer knit community. But since we've gotten out and we don't have that day-to-day brotherhood that we're forced into, and we kind of left to our own devices as civilians out here, it's kind of hard to find that.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, it totally is. And I agree with you too, that I think we're not very good at, I'm not that good at it still. And Aleishia does a good job of coming to me at times and going, hey, what's going on for you right now? And checking in with me around things because she can tell that something's off. And sometimes I don't even know what it is, because sometimes it takes me a day or two to figure it out. But yeah.
Yeah. So when you guys get into emotional intelligence, there's actually some research around this. And again, I think we just always want to be careful about being super black and white and stereotypical, right? So like some of the things I'll say in here today will sound very stereotypical, right? I'm making big generalizations. It doesn't mean it represents everyone. I think women are groomed to be more nurturing. I mean, go to fucking Target, into the toy area. What do you see? Dolls, houses, baking. Go to the boys. What do you see? Building, creating stuff. I mean,
Board stuff.
Some of it's gender influenced by society in and of itself. It doesn't mean though that women grow up with an emotional vocabulary. It doesn't mean that men. It doesn't mean that. So some women don't have an emotional vocabulary, and some men do have an emotional vocabulary.
Yeah, that's true.
It just depends on the household they're raised in. And right, then you also have society though, that for men, I think we talked about this a little bit on the Shame podcast. What are the emotions that are okay, right? Well, you can be angry, or you can be stoic, or you can be certain things, but maybe not be sad or disappointed or show your grief in public, or, where women are considered more hysterical or emotional.
I'll agree with that.
Although if you fucking look at who started wars and sometimes who's in office, that could be debatable.
Yeah, but what are the top two reasons that wars were started? Religion or women? We fight over you.
Well, I don't know if World War II was over women or religion, was it?
I guess you could argue that Hitler's religious beliefs were probably...
Were they though? I don't know. Or were the Jews just scapegoats? I don't know. I genuinely don't know.
I don't know.
Look at how we just...
Yeah.
We just... So anyway...
That's how this goes. Squirrel.
That's not what we were even talking about. Like where we got there.
Yeah. Oh, it happens.
Yeah. No, I mean, so emotional literacy, reading minds.
No, I mean, there's stereotypical, and we've talked about social and cultural influences, and we talk about this a lot on the podcast at times too, about dudes, it's okay to show emotion as a man. You talked about hugging Caleb at the end of football and crying on the football field, right? And there's nothing wrong with that, right? And there's also nothing wrong when you have a trusted partner or friend or something like that. If you're having an issue, going to them and sharing what you're feeling, or letting them know where you're at with something that you may need help with, right? We talk about that too, right? Guys, you need to ask for help. You can't always do all this on your own, And I mean, dude, we blew shit up and killed people, and here we are talking about empathy and validation like it's okay, right? Like,
well, and I'm
you're not less of a man because you understand these things or attempt to build these skills.
No, I don't think so. I think it would have been a different conversation 10 years ago for you and I.
Well, sure.
Just because of the environment that we were in.
Probably.
But now that, we've got a little maturity on our side, we're able to kind of catalog that part of our life and look back on it now with a little bit of situational awareness and experience and go, you know what, man, maybe I could have handled myself a little bit different in some of these situations.
Sure. Yeah, especially when it comes to like personal relationships.
Yeah.
To a certain extent.
Well, and too, man, and I don't want to gloss over the fact that in the world that we came from, I don't want to use the word forced, but you kind of are. You're kind of forced into this. You're forced into a prearranged marriage with a lot of these people in your squadron that, ordinarily I probably wouldn't hang out with these people.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm forced to hang out with dudes that maybe I wouldn't otherwise hang out with.
There's truth to that for sure.
You go to a TDY and it's a small group of you guys. Maybe you take a 4-ship somewhere, so there's like 4 or 6 of you, and you go out to dinner. Well, I don't like any of you people.
Yeah.
Why would I? Whatever. Okay, I'll suffer through it. So much more difficult to have some of these conversations with people like that and those types of relationships when you hit the nail on the nugget a second ago when you said there takes a lot of trust in there. And I can probably count on one hand how many men I would be comfortable talking about with some of these things.
Yeah.
And that's just, maybe that's my fault for keeping my circle very small. But
no, I don't think that's your fault at all. I don't think your circle needs to be very big. I could do the same thing. There's probably on one hand that I could count the number of people who I would trust really personal things with or really personal struggles with. And I don't think it needs to be bigger than that, but you need to have a couple, 2 or 3.
Yeah. Just like anything, you need an outlet.
Do that with, or you need to be able to build some skills so that if you've got a friend or a partner that's going through something, you know, you can approach them in this manner and really show up in a way that's going to be supportive and helpful, you know, and not turn something else, not make something that's already painful potentially for them, you know, even more of a detractor from your relationship, or, you know, even more painful overall, that leads to disagreements or fighting, or, you know, how it could snowball in a bunch of different ways. So, I don't know.
I think we just became case studies for her. She's over here taking notes and shit.
I am. So I don't.
Subject 1 has no feelings or emotions. He needs to go bury his head in the sand.
No, but it's interesting because what I'm picking up is that, like, emotions, I'm almost wondering if there's a polarization, right? If you show something other than a specific emotion, it's right, I'm emotional, or I'm showing emotions, and like, that's just not how it works. Like, there's like over probably 80 to 100 emotions or experiences that we can have from, again, I'm irritated, I'm annoyed, I'm pissed, I'm enraged, right? And these might all fall under this anger spectrum. And I'm proud, that's an emotion. So we're emotional beings. People like to pretend like we're not, but we're emotional beings. And just because I'm not showing some emotional dysregulation or I'm crying my eyes out doesn't mean I don't have emotions. I think maybe it gets misinterpreted, because if I'm showing an emotion I'm not comfortable with, or society says I shouldn't be showing, it's considered emotional.
Yeah, so it's the perception of the emotion, not the actual emotion.
I think so, because they're not good or bad. They're just.
So is that a you problem or a me problem? Is that the receiver's problem or the individual's problem?
What do you mean?
Well, so we've been talking a little bit about displaying emotion. We've gotten a little ways away from the empathy piece of it and more on the emotional side of it. It's, again, these are all going to tie together when we go to the emotional equity. But if you're the person that has the emotion, is there responsibility on you to properly communicate that emotion to somebody? And if you don't, and that person doesn't respond to it, whose problem is it? Who's to blame on that one? You know, like, you didn't tell me what was going on. I can't read it on your face because maybe I have a good resting bitch face or something.
Yes. Yeah. So, like, if we're in a relationship, which we are, yeah, I mean, it's my responsibility to communicate emotion. Now, if I'm stuck or I'm struggling, is it okay for him to kind of come to me and guess what's going on, or knowing that maybe he needs to help pull me up? That's fine too. But for me to be angry because he didn't do something for me because I didn't express it, yeah, no. I mean, I think if I'm struggling with something and I'm experiencing something that I want help with, then I need to be the one to communicate it, because you don't want that mind reading piece is not healthy, right? Where, like, maybe I'm blaming him because I'm like, well, I was quiet for 2 days. Why didn't you guess what was wrong with me? Or why didn't you fix it for, when he has no idea?
Yeah. Well, does that responsibility fall back to Cass though for not trying to pull it out?
No, I don't think so.
No.
Okay.
I don't think so. If
I recognize that something's wrong with her or something's going on, then yeah, I'm going to go up and go, hey,
keep poking
what's going on?
Yeah.
Right?
And that's
is everything okay?
A personality thing, right? Because that's just who you are.
Well, yeah, but I mean, I think it's good for men to be aware of that too, to a certain extent, right? Like, if you can tell, I mean, if you know somebody well enough, you know when something's off.
Yeah.
You know, I can tell if you're pissed off or not most of the time.
Yeah.
You know, and I can go, hey, dude, what's going on? Like, need to vent? What's going on? Right?
Same.
And so, you know, I think those questions are worth asking, and that's part of that exploration. That's part of that piece of empathy where you kind of try to explore to figure out, hey, maybe what's going on or what the underlying emotion is, right? I mean, if something's really bad, you're probably going to know. But yeah, I would, as part of developing this skill, I would approach that person that I care about and go, everything okay? What's going on? You know, do you seem off?
Yeah.
Is there something going on? Would you like to talk about something?
No, I'm fine.
And if you go, no, I'm fine, I'll be like, all right, well, dude, if you change your mind or you want to talk about anything, I'm here for you. You know?
I think I get that a lot with the limited interactions. I mean, probably nowhere near what you guys have experienced in this, but the limited times that I've gotten a chance to do this with people, and it's not like I go around looking for it, but if I get into a situation like that, I'm like, hey, bro, you okay? No, I'm good. I kind of leave it there.
Yeah.
I don't really scratch or keep digging it all. I was like, well, I mean, he said it was okay, you know.
Yeah.
But then here's the effed up part, man, is like, you know, we've both advertised that we lost 2 really good bros within the last year. So there's got to be some balance in there, man. Like, I know that something's going on with this dude, but he won't, and go back to your shame and all that, because of whatever reason, he won't express it. He won't tell me about it. Like, short of throwing a bag over this guy's head in the middle of the night and dragging him to a rehab center, what else can I do?
Yeah. Well, that wouldn't work either because they weren't ready for rehab. But
oh God,
no, but maybe it could have stopped something in the moment. At least, I don't know. But
yeah, addiction's a whole nother beast. So again, if we just think everything falls on a spectrum, if this is somebody that you do know pretty well and you know something's going on with their life, you could be a little more expressive. Like, hey, man, not trying to intrude too much, but I know you're dealing with a lot right now. I can only imagine what's going on for you. I'm here for you if you need me. And then the ball's in their court. Like, you can take a horse to water, but you can't make them drink type of thing. It's just, yeah.
Yeah, you're not responsible for the other person's emotional regulation or even getting them to say anything. It's just, how do you want to show up in that relationship and how do you approach it? Right. And instead of approaching it from a vein of, well, let me solve your problem for you, or, hey, let me tell you how much worse I have it than you do. It's, approaching that with the skill of empathy, and just taking a step back, trying to identify what's going on, what the underlying emotion is, and then identifying with that, and then being there to support them in whatever way they need support and not being judgmental about it. Does that make sense? Is that a decent wrap up?
I think so. Stuff gets complicated.
I don't even really know what just happened in the last 41 minutes. So I'm just kind of along for the ride. Hey, can you crack those blinds and get just a little bit more light in here? It's starting to get we're starting to lose, starting to get some shadows on Aleishia's face over there. So yeah, perfect. That'll work. Awesome.
Okay.
Well, you're the one with the notes. I don't even have a computer over here.
You want to jump to validation?
Yeah, let's go to validation next. Any other questions on empathy?
Probably a ton, but
go ahead.
Well, just actually to wrap up empathy. So, just remembering it's a skill, practice it, trip over it, go back in, try again, feel stupid, feel awkward. Yeah. You can even say, hey, look, I'm trying a new skill. Like, of course, I'm thinking, if somebody's in a relationship, like, this is what it looks like, right? Just don't beat yourself up if you don't get it right, because that's not the point of empathy. You're just trying to show up for somebody.
Well, this is the Be1 Change 1 process: is practice, fail, assess, repeat.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's for sure.
Okay, so validation. So, validation, right? So we're just letting the other person know, basically, that we're that what they're saying or doing makes sense. Whether it makes sense to them, that's fine. Doesn't make sense to me, but it makes sense to you. I can validate that. So this is
Roscoe's already.
I have questions. What if it doesn't make sense?
So validation's really about it's like we're just letting the other person know that to a certain extent we understand the dots they've connected to get to where they're going. Right. So
here's an example. So let's say you're mentoring a kid who's in his early 20s, doesn't have the hindsight that you and I have, right? So maybe he's making some decisions, and like you and I have talked about before, you can see the impending train crash coming, but there ain't nothing that you can do to stop. You can try to stop it if you want, but you're not going to stop it, right? There's some people that are just hard learners, and they've got to make the mistake in order to learn from it. So when he's expressing those things to you and he's putting those dots together, and over in your brain, you're going, oh, dude, here it comes, right? You have a choice to make there. If you want, you can go, well, you're setting yourself up for failure, and here's the 5 ways you can fix it right now. Or you can go, yeah, I can see how you came to that conclusion. Do you want to talk about it any deeper? Do you want to drill down on it a little bit and maybe make sure that we've thought through the process entirely? Or are you good? And if they're like, I'm good, then you're like, okay, man, yeah, I get it. Looks like you've thought about it a little bit. So good luck.
It seems like what you're saying is try to avoid the comma but. So yeah, man, I see what you're saying, and I see that you've at least identified a couple of the markers, comma, but there's some glaring holes in your plan here.
And here's why you may want to approach it that way. Because if you just come off the top rope, John Cena style, and go,
You can't see me.
Yeah, you can't see me. You can't see me, and here I come for you. And you start telling them about all the things that they're fucking away.
Yeah,
dude, they're gonna shut down. They're not gonna
shields. Yeah.
And your ability to influence them in the future in that relationship may be damaged to a certain extent.
Yeah,
right?
I've told you recently that I've had to kind of change my tactics with some people that I'm mentoring right now because of that there. It's
and so
I can't shaky finger them anymore.
Yeah, well, and so I can tell you in my own personal experience, having done this with somebody who I care very deeply about, it changed the nature of our relationship. Yeah. And there were times that I had to bite my tongue and grit my teeth a little bit because I could see the impending train crash coming. But by doing that, it completely transformed in many ways the nature of our relationship to the point where now that person is coming to me for advice on a regular basis. And it's not, hey, let me tell you how I put the dots together. It's, hey, I think I've got this put together, but I'm not sure. What am I not seeing here?
Yeah.
And now I can actually provide some feedback.
He's created a window there for you.
Yeah. Well, or maybe I did by using validation over a period of time to let him know that I'm not judging him. I'm on his side and I'm here to support him. But I'm also not just going to, sometimes, and this is the hardest part for me about raising kids is sometimes you have to let them fail, and you don't want to see that. Oh, it's so, because you don't want any of that stuff for your children, right? But sometimes you just got to let them fail. Because they're not going to get the lessons otherwise.
Let me push back on one thing there. It's not that I don't want them to fail. I think they need to fail. I think that failure it's great for them to give them perspective moving forward.
Yeah, well, it's
I've told all of my kids, I want you to work a job that you hate for like 6 months. I want you to go pour concrete on I-10 in the summertime so that from now on you have perspective of, man, like it's okay to sit here in this cubicle and in the air conditioning. You know what I mean? So it seems like almost every single day I walk into work, I have the same conversations with some of my techs, man. We're all like, hey man, how's it going? Good morning, whatever. And I say almost the same thing every single day. It's like, dude, there's worse ways to make a living. Trust me, ask me how I know. Yeah. Man, I mean, I toted irrigation pipe on my dad's cotton farm. I was a crew chief in Florida and Alaska. So I have that experience. I have that perspective. So to let my kids fail, I'm okay with that to a degree. What pisses me off with them sometimes is like, dude, I'm giving you the answers to the test. Just write them down and go past the fucking test, and they won't do it.
Yeah.
That's, I'm giving you the cheat code here that I had to figure out the hard way, up, down, left, right, BA start. And they won't write it down and they won't listen. That's the part that aggravates me.
And dude, I get it. That's completely understandable. But the only thing that I'll say to that is that sometimes in order for them to figure out how to put the dots together correctly, you've got to let them go through whatever that process is for them, because their process may not be the same as yours, right? Yeah. It's just like when I was in command, I had to realize that when I would give somebody a task, all that really mattered was the timeline and the quality of how they got it done. How they got it done was up to them.
Yeah.
Because there were guys that would do things very differently than me. And I would sit back and go, that's not very efficient, or oh, I wouldn't do it that way. I wouldn't say that to them though, because that's their process. Part of that is letting your younger guys, your younger troops figure that out for themselves.
Yeah, we should do this as instructors too.
Yeah, and in feedback, you just go, well, hey man, next time, you could get from X to Z much faster by doing this if nobody's ever showed you that before, right? So sometimes you just have to let them figure that process out for themselves, because if they continually get the answers to the test, then they don't, when they get to a point where they don't have the answer anymore, they might not have the skill to actually put it all together to pass the test. Does that make sense?
It does. And I know she's itching to talk over here, but
I'm fine.
I'm
just listening.
I'm imagining like, let's say we're going to do a 4-ship defensive counter air ride. And so here's your tactical problem today is you have to, or your task and purpose is you have to defend the Cass's mom's house from the bad guys for 30 minutes. Okay. And here's your tactical problem is you've got this many expected bad guys coming. So go figure it out. And dude, left to their own devices, you'll see guys come up with some,
I know,
crazy
stuff.
Where did you get that, man? Oh, I read it in a paper that I found on, what, dude, stop. And so you have to give them some left and right boundaries and kind of keep steering the ship a little bit, and that's kind of the way that I'm looking at mentoring my kids nowadays is I'm willing to give you enough rope, but at the same time, it's still my responsibility as a dad to kind of keep this ship going in the right direction here so that we don't go out and spend 2 hours in the airspace burning all this jet fuel and not learn a goddamn thing except your plan was jacked up. And I knew that yesterday.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think there's maybe some balance there, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
I'm sure there is, but I think it's relationship dependent. I think it depends on the individual that you're working with to a certain extent, because this isn't the fighter squadron. We're not talking about, a dude at Red Flag who is going to be going through his mission commander upgrade, and you don't want him to make the squadron look like a clown show.
Yeah, don't use the word ball walk.
Yeah. So, so yes, this is more specific to, those interpersonal relationships with people that you really care about, and being able to show up in a way that helps validate their experience instead of just going into fix it mode and let me solve this problem for you, because you're obviously not capable of doing it for yourself. Right.
Pro.
I'm all like, yeah.
She
you guys are having
just
a great
going with
conversation.
Does that make sense though?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, and validation, when you think of validation, is like interpersonal effectiveness at the end of the day. So I think like what you guys are talking about is spot on. Again, we're not always validating things. If you're in a squadron and you're trying to keep people alive, right? Maybe there's something to validate, and maybe there's a time and a place, and maybe you guys are actually even validating and not realizing it, but it's, hey, we're doing X, Y, Z. But depending on the relationship, again, like, older children or a child who's having a meltdown, or, right, hey, it looks like you're having a really tough time right now, right? It just helps slow things down. They're acknowledged. It actually helps to de-escalate the situation is what it does. They're heard, they're seen, whatever. And then we can move forward. Do you need my help? Do you need my help figuring something out? Do I?
Yeah, especially if somebody's spun up, because what that does, what she was just talking about, is it takes them out of that emotional part of their brain as it kind of de-escalates things, and it gets them back into the logical part of their brain. And now we can actually have that logical conversation about maybe how we solve whatever the problem is that's going on, right? But if they're emotional and then you just start pouring fire on top of that, they're not going to listen or hear a word you say.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that. And stuff that we've mentioned before is like, it's okay to take a time out. It's okay to go to your corner.
Yep, it's
for
okay
a little
to de-escalate.
Yep, let the emotions die down a little bit. Let the situation diffuse itself for just a minute or two, and then come back and re-engage.
Yeah. Because I think one of the issues, whether it's socially, culturally, the way you're raised, whatever, we as men tend to go right into problem solving mode.
Yes.
Well, you got a problem? Here, let me fix it for you. This is going on. Let me tell you how to fix that. Right. And sometimes that's okay if the person's asking you to help them solve the problem. But if they're not, being able to just validate what their experience is, what that can do is, by de-escalating maybe the emotion that they're having around something, that gets you to the point now where they go, okay, well, what do I do now? And now we can have that conversation about, okay, well, let's problem solve this a little bit, right? Have you thought about X? Have you thought about Y? Have you thought about Z? What are we missing here? Like, what's the way forward?
Yeah. Well, and one thing that you're kind of getting to, at least what I think is, when we're talking about these kinds of things, like you and I sit down and have a discussion, and or I come in one day and you're like, oh, I can tell Roscoe's got some stuff on his mind or something like that. Hey man, how's it going? And maybe I give you the 5-minute Reader's Digest version of my week or my day or whatever. Just that kind of,
yeah, right.
It just kind of makes me feel a little bit better. And now I'm in a point where, oh, okay, now my face isn't red anymore. Now I can discuss rather than argue or emote outwardly what I'm trying to express here. So maybe it's just that given that opportunity for that person to maybe get some stuff out, blow off some steam.
Dude, that's spot on, because how many times you get a call and somebody's venting to you, and when all they really need to hear from you is for you to go, dude, that sounds super frustrating.
Yeah.
Instead of, oh, well, you know what I would do? I would tell that motherfucker to XYZ, and I would, blah, 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 blah. That's not helping, right?
Yeah.
So that's a great point. I mean, sometimes it's just, you don't have to always fix everything, especially as a man, right? Sometimes all you need to do is just go, hey, dude, I recognize what you're going through. That sounds like it sucks.
Yeah.
And it does suck, and that's it. And it's just giving them an opening, because when you do that, all of a sudden that trust, like you increase that equity, right?
Yeah.
So you're depositing into that trust account, and now they start to trust more and more, and then they start to come to you. And then those conversations, at least in my experience, will start to shift from, I'm calling you because I'm really frustrated, to, hey, this is going on. What do you, what are your thoughts about it? What should I do about this? Do you have any input? Do you have any feedback?
Yeah.
And that changes everything, right?
I have a recent example of something that's on the complete opposite end of that spectrum, though. And it's a real good friend of mine at work got a job that he was really hoping he would get. It's a great move for his family, and he was really super excited about it. He's still going to be a CIP. He's just going to be at a different location that him and his wife really wanted to go to. And I mean, we were walking up the stairs, and it was all I could do to not like put my arm around him and go, dude, that's fucking awesome, man. And so I was super happy for the guy. So it doesn't always have to be this sadness and, oh, you had a bad day. Maybe the guy's having a great day and he just got some really awesome news, and
it's been excited for him and happy for him. Absolutely. It can go both ways.
The pro hasn't really.
What else you got on validation? Well, I've had to, so validation is important to me because I've personally had to do a lot of work around it. Because of our backgrounds, it was very easy for me to go into CAS IP mode.
Yeah.
And go, all right, dude, well, let's learn root cause. Looks like you're a fucking idiot to me, So
valid. Yeah, I'll take that.
And so validation's important. And it's important too, because I've seen it change the dynamic in some of my relationships by just changing how I approach them.
Yeah, that's good. And with
dude, it's really fucking hard.
It is, man. And I suck at it so bad because I'm pretty good at the problem solving stuff.
Yeah, I know.
Like and you get into that, do what you're good at kind of thing.
Well, it's easy to just roll right into that mindset because we did it every day for so long.
Yeah, exactly.
So
what else you got on validation?
We're all looking to you.
Yeah.
So.
No, but I'll add on to that because the problem solving piece, and I too, I'm a problem solver. I'm a fixer. So I too had to learn how to validate. And so, but one of the things, and I shared this with you, that really hit it home for me is that when we talk about contempt, right? Sorry, when we talk about contempt and that, like, I'm kind of better than you. I know more than you. Like, that's how contempt can come across, and it's really damaging to relationships. Problem solving can be a form of contempt because, in a way, we're telling somebody you don't know how to fix your own problem, and I do. So let me step in and problem solve for you. And that was like, oh.
But what if that's true though?
Well, it depends on who you're dealing with.
Yeah, maybe Cass has experience in something that I don't.
Maybe.
I mean, we're for all intents and purposes, we're peers. Mm-hmm. I mean, same age,
we are.
Same family history. We both are professionals at our employment. We are, I would consider us peers, but he has experiences that I don't have. And so maybe I come to him with a problem that I'm really pissed off about, and he has the answer to it. I don't give a fuck what you feel about it. I want to know what the answer is, man. Yeah, how do I make more money in my 401k? You're smarter at this than I am.
But you would ask me that question because of the relationship that we have.
Yeah. Well,
and the trust that
because
we've
of the trust.
Yeah. And so that's the difference, right? It's not that you can't help problem solve, but it's more the building. The validation allows you to build that trust over time to where you can have those conversations. And the important part of it too is if somebody's really upset or frustrated, because we've done this with our kids and it works, man. When you validate the experience that they're having instead of going right into problem solving mode, it de-escalates the emotion around it, and we get to a place where we can actually talk about things logically.
Let me give you a different side of the same coin real fast. And this is something that I get frustrated with people sometimes when this happens to me, right? I come into this room once or twice a week, and I'm not pointing the finger at you. I'm just using this as an example, but it's obvious that I'm having a bad day. Cass says, "Hey man, what's going on? How was your week?" Or you look irritated. What's up? And I tell him in 2 or 3 sentences what happened. And he goes, oh man, that really sucks. Maybe what I wanted to hear was, yeah, dude, I had a similar experience one time where and now I've realized that I'm not the only one that's having this. I'm not the only one that's going through this problem. And this is something that you and I used to do very well in your office was we go in there and shut the door and just spill our fucking guts, man. And that's where I think a lot of that rapport was built because of shared experiences and not validating necessarily right up front, but hey, dude, I know exactly what you're going through. I've got this and I've got that and I've got this going on too. So now we have common ground. Now I realize that I'm not on an island by myself.
Well, but it's just like the empathy piece, right? You have to know who you're in a relationship with and what they're asking for to a certain extent, because I know that sharing with you, you don't take that as me trying to one up your story, nor were my stories that I ever shared with you trying to one up stories. It wasn't in the vein of, hey man, you think you got it bad? Well, let me tell you this story about my kid, right? It was more, yeah, dude, I know exactly what you're going through because here's what I've had to deal with in the past, right? Yeah. And that's different, but it's also validating.
Yeah, I was going to say, could that be a form of validation?
Yeah, I think so, because I'm not trying to problem solve it for you. I'm just going, dude, I know where you're at. And yeah, we've got some shared experience around this.
Yeah. And
then I'm waiting for you to go, well, what do I do? And then I'll jump in and go, well, hey man, here's what I've done that's worked really well in the past. Or I might go, hey, Roscoe, I've had some experience with this in the past and I've had some success too. Do you want to hear what I've done?
Yeah. Something that worked for me was,
and give you that option. And then if you go, yeah, dude, I want to hear it, then I'll tell you.
Yeah.
But I'm not just going to be spring loaded into going, well, dude, I've dealt with this. Here's how you fucking fix it.
Yeah. Get the pens, get on the whiteboard.
Yeah. Because when you come across that way, and again, it depends on the person, the relationship that you've established. But when you come across like that, it can put people on the defense really quick. And most of the time when people go on the defensive, they shut down. Like they're not listening to what you have to say anymore. Or if they feel like they're being one-upped or whatever. Yeah, and they feel invalidated. And so you're actually diminishing the opportunity to have impact or influence on them in the future when you do those things. But by validating, you start to build that trust where it opens up the opportunity for you to have more impact and influence.
Well, and if you go back to like interpersonal effectiveness, so depending on, again, right, it's just a tool in the toolkit that we pull out, just like your bombs on your airplane. You're not dropping every bomb on everything, right? There's very specific things you drop
bullshit.
in places.
Ripple 8.
My point.
Yeah, we get your point.
So this isn't Top Gun. This isn't Maverick.
What? Different scenarios.
That was a documentary.
I know.
Yeah, right.
Like, wow, do you know how long you have to go back to get spun back up in training to go fly again? And yeah. So anyway, but so again, right. So if we're talking, I guess, kids, and we're validating, like, okay, let's say a kid gets in a fight at school, or there's, I don't know, something goes down, something happens with sports. It's like, hey, that sucks. Like, I can see why you're so upset with that. And then again, what's your goal? Like, and again, it goes back to values. Is your value that you're going to tell your kid how they should respond to that? Do you want to ask them open-ended questions so you can start teaching them to trust their own intuition and see what they have in there for problem solving? So it just goes back to like, what's your values? What's your goals? Why are you doing this? And then you just plug the different pieces in is really what it's about. And coming back to this in relationships, right? And then especially, again, I was thinking like for men, right? Like the jumping in, the problem solving, like, and I know women do the same thing, but the not being heard, it can be difficult to validate somebody when they're feeling attacked or something's coming at them in a defensive way. But validation is very much a de-escalation. It is a conflict repair method. And if you can master it, you can actually influence the conversation very well. But you just got to get your own lock your own shit down and like regulate your own emotions to be like, okay, that makes sense. I see why you're upset. Even though in your head you're going, that's really fucked up. I don't,
that's really stupid.
Yeah, I see in your head how you made sense of that and why you're upset about because of what the conclusion you came to in your head. I don't agree with it, but I don't have to say that, right? Because we're not validating things. I don't have to agree with it. I can just say it makes sense to me how you came to that conclusion.
That's a good point.
Yeah, it makes sense to me why you feel. But I think what happens is people go, if I say that to them, then I'm admitting defeat. But you're not. You're just saying, I see how you got there, right? That makes sense to me. I can see how your feelings got
with
hurt.
Katie, I've known her for 26 years. I know what this woman's thinking.
Mm-hmm.
Like I know we can finish each other's sentences. So if I'm doing this with her, that's a different conversation than if I'm doing it with, a guy that I've only known for a year or two.
Yeah.
A work, what's the word I'm looking for? Somebody you work with. Words are hard. Damn it. Colleague, coworker. There you go. See
now here.
Yeah.
Like who's got it?
I'm sure there's an app.
What is a colleague?
I'm sure. Siri, what is somebody that I work with? Yeah. Gosh, words are hard. But yeah. So one thing that you were just talking about though, and gosh, dang it, squirrel. It'll come back to me. Cast talk for a second.
Yeah, I would just so like what's important.
I hate it when that happens.
I do it all the time too.
What's important to validate? Like when I mean, have we hit on that stuff? Like what are the important things?
Okay, let me look at my
How
notes.
do you practice this other than what we've already talked about? Is there anything else that you want to pull out around that?
I think, right, the things we want to validate only what we find can be valid, right? That kernel of truth, that tiny bit of thing, no matter how tiny it is, even if it's that, like, I understand how you got to that point, or I understand how you could feel that way based on how you made sense of it. The facts of the situation, how the person feels, their beliefs, their opinions. Those are the things we want to, that are easy, low-hanging fruit. And I'll even encourage people in relationships, run around, validate your partner, even if you guys aren't fighting, right? If they come home, like let's say you went home after working and you cooked up a huge meal, Katie even just simply going, wow, you had a really hard day at work and you did all this. Well, that's more of an appreciation, but still, you did all this work, right? It's validating the work you put in. It's still validating, right? So we can actually practice this day in and day out, and we probably all do it anyway. We just don't realize it. But yeah, the big thing is we're not. It doesn't mean we agree. It doesn't mean we like it. Doesn't mean any of that. So,
well, I remember what I was going to say a second ago, and it was one of the traps I think we fall into as men, because maybe we're not as, I don't know, we're not hardwired to express emotion like that. We'll go in. I know she's like, we are. I've had this conversation before with other dudes. Like, hey, dude, he's obviously having a bad day. Hey, man, everything all right? Yeah, dude. This, that, and another. Oh, man, that fucking sucks. Want to go shoot guns? Yep. And that's it. And I don't know if there was what we're talking about validation there, but as men, maybe we fall into that trap of, we've identified that at least something is wrong here. Let's deflect and go do something manly. Let's go chop wood. Let's go four-wheeling. Let's go shoot guns. Do something. Saying
it sucks is validation. That's validation.
Yeah, well,
you don't have to do much more after that. If they want to talk about it, they will. If they don't, they don't. Again, they're just, these are very quick little boom, boom, booms. Unless, I think the thing that comes to my mind where it's most challenging is, and where I think maybe, I don't know, you guys can speak for yourselves, maybe where I see it the most is the partner that is like venting, and they might just want to vent, and the other partner's trying to jump in problem solving. Yeah. And then it just creates a big issue. But yeah, something as simple as, so this is what validation is. Okay. It's paying attention, eye contact. I'm looking at you. I'm nodding my head. That's validation. I might reflect back what it said. So you told that dude that his day sucked, right? And you might go, yeah, that's a form of validation. We talked about reading minds, right? So if you might be like looking tired and I need a ride home, and I look at you and I ask you for a ride home, and you kind of slump in your chair, and I go, okay, you know what, you look really tired. Let me go run and ask somebody else, right? So I'm kind of, reading in between the lines. The understanding, this is what we've been talking about. Like I make sense of what you're saying based on the connections you're making. Again, we're like acknowledging the valid. So if we're getting the brunt of something, like we didn't take out the garbage when we were supposed to, just being like, yeah, I said I'd take it out, right? And then just even being ourselves, right? So we're not one-upping, we're not one-downing somebody, we're not fragilizing people. We're being, we're willing to make, hey, I made a mistake, I'm sorry. Ask other people for opinions, not being defensive.
Here's a good example on the understanding piece, right? So let's say you and Katie are throwing a party, and you guys call or text friends and you forget me. And I find out you had a party. And you show up for us to record a podcast. And I'm a little cold. I'm a little miffed.
Yeah.
And you're like, hey, dude, what's going on? I'm like, dude, why the fuck didn't you invite me to your party? Complete misunderstanding. Probably just oversight on your part, but I'm really pissed. Right? Are you going to sit there and go, oh, dude, that's my bad. It's really not a big deal. Why, we must have forgotten to text you or whatever. Or you're going to, or, if I go into this whole thing where I vent to you about, I'm really pissed about how you could sit there and go, yeah, well, dude, fuck, come on, man. It's me, like I probably just forgot to text you or whatever. Right.
Get over it. We're going to hit record.
Or do you go, oh, dude, my bad. Like, I could totally see how you might think that, like, we were trying to exclude you guys because you didn't get the invite, but it was total oversight on our part. We would never have, right? Those are two completely different ways to approach it.
Yeah.
One's validating in a sense because you're telling me that what I'm feeling and the misperception that I have around what happened is valid. Yeah. And you can see how I came to that conclusion. Where the other one is like, oh, dude, you should have never drawn that conclusion. You know me better than that, and that's stupid. And move on, right? So that's where, if that kind of can paint the picture a little bit.
No, that's great, and now's where I get to say what I get to say on every episode. You ready for this? Here's that big O knot.
Yeah,
big O knot that we talk about, right? Because what you just described, how I would react to that would take a little humility on my part.
Yep,
and go, oh, dude, I completely screwed that up, man. Yeah, my bad. Holy shit. And let me own that for a second. And that takes a little bit of, swallow my humble pie for a second. I fucked up. And you know what? Next time I create the text message chain, I'm going to have it maybe in my notepad to, don't forget Cass and Aleishia.
Yeah. Or maybe you've got a friend like me that's introverted and never shows up anyway. So you just stop inviting them.
Yeah. Because fuck that guy, right?
And then they get butthurt over it, right? There's two different ways to approach that. You could go, oh, dude, you never fucking come anyway. So why would I invite you this time, man? You didn't come the last 10 times. That's not going to be validating. But if you go, hey, dude, I'm so sorry. I can totally understand why you might be upset because you think we're excluding you. That was not our intention, but you hadn't come in the past. And so we just kind of made an assumption, and it was a false assumption that we made, and that's on us, that you might not be interested.
You remember when we all had the old Nokia phones with the game, the snake on it and all that shit? Is that little blue thing with the big ass buttons on it, and you had to pay by the text message? Yeah, that's why I didn't invite your ass, because I knew you weren't going to come, and I was paying. Standard text message rates may apply here. So,
but do you see the difference? Like, no, I think that's a good way to kind of draw it out a little bit in a real world scenario about how even misunderstandings that you may be responsible for, the way that somebody perceives that, even though it's not valid. Yeah. And you're like, well, dude, you shouldn't think that. Well, you're not going to don't say that. Just go, oh man, I can totally see how you might think that, but here's the truth. Dude, and I'm sorry.
There's no harm and no foul in just saying my bad.
Yeah.
And just.
Well, and I'm going to jump in and go, because going back, it's like, again, like if you're in a relationship and your partner is complaining, bitching up a storm, whatever, and it's just validating to go, sounds like you had a really shitty day. What do you need from me? Boom. That's it. Right. Let them tell you what they need. Now, and I have a relationship with somebody a lot like you guys have, right? Where her and I can just talk shit to each other about what's going on in our lives, because we've had so many similar experiences that we get that with each other. And so things are going to be different with different people, but she's lost some people recently in her life. And do I use empathy and validation? Fuck yeah, I do. Because I want her to know I'm there for her. I do. I just have to do this. So men are not hardwired.
I was waiting on it. I was going to bring it back.
She said,
I was going to bring it back if she didn't. So,
because I don't want your listeners to think men are not from Mars, women are not from, they're not from Venus. Like, it's just not, we're people, we're humans. It's just not the case. Society, right? We grow up. This is what gender conformity. This is you're a man. You identify as a man. This is your gender. This is how you behave. You're a woman. This is how you're supposed. And that's the gender conformity piece of it. So it's not right. People, you might have a sensitive male who grows up in a home that nurtures that, and that man has no problem, spin off emotions. I mean, I don't think most homes are emotionally literate anyway, right? I mean, but yeah, I just want to put that out there. People are
No, I see your point, and maybe I misspoke a little bit. the gender norms, the traditional gender roles and things like that. And I know you see the notes that I put on the page there about, women. You tend to see more female nurses than male nurses. You tend to see more male used car salesmen than female, and maybe that's a society thing. Maybe that's the way we're hardwired, but we've all seen this. You got a couple that has a mixed brood of boys and girls, and they grow them up, or they try to raise them very sheltered. They don't let them watch Arnold Schwarzenegger movies and shit like that. But if this little kid, 4 years old, goes out into the yard and finds a stick, guess what? It's a gun. It just is. Guys do this stuff all the time. And maybe the same thing with girls. I don't have any girls in my household other than Katie, so I can't really speak intelligently to it. But I can tell you that from the boys' side of it, some of that stuff is just hardwired in their genetics.
I don't know the research on that, to be honest with you. I grew up liking guns, liking dirt bikes, liking bow and arrows, so I don't know and I wasn't exposed to that. Those are just things I like. So I think you would have to look at the research on how much that is influencing that household, because there's so many covert messages as well, right? Like, girls don't talk that way, or if you're a lady, this, or boys get away with a lot more things than girls do in a house. And I grabbed the statistic, and this is a little out and left field, but I think it's really poignant. And let me put my glasses on for this. This is important. No, I'm just kidding. No, but so a caregiver is a caregiver, right? It doesn't matter if it's a man or a woman. The attachment's can be the same depending on how that caregiver is. But like back in the 1940s, Kinsey, who was a big researcher on sex, found out that 70% of men had extramarital affairs, but only 40% of women had them. More research shows that there's absolutely no difference between men and women and their extramarital affairs at this point. Why? There's more women in the workforce now, because women have now gone into the workforce, especially coming after World War II, and have more opportunity.
Yeah.
So there's a lot. And when we talk about nurses, is that because that was what was open to them, because they weren't allowed to be doctors, and we do see a lot more male nurses now, but it is, I feel like you've got to see the Barbie movie. That makes me think of Ken. I'm sorry. It's just a funny scene in there. And John Cena's in there too.
All right.
But again, it's so nuanced. And I just, again, encourage people not to get caught in that stereotyping. So, because we don't want to lock ourselves in that black and white, like I can't do it because I'm hardwired to be that way. That's all.
Well, I mean, and let me undo some of the things that I said. I'm not trying to make any claims, because I don't have a computer in front of me. I don't have any fucking research done. It's not like I don't sit around and read abstracts in my fun time or in my free time. But I'm just going off of what's observation, I guess, is it. And your point, I guess, to kind of start wrapping up, was more society driven, more influenced, rather than this is just the way that we're hardwired, kind of thing. And yeah, I'll buy that. And if I articulated that in a way that made it seem like I was I don't have any data or any science to stipulate that claim. I can look back at cavemen and say that there were definite gender roles in the cavemen. The wife was the nurturer, the guy was the hunter gatherer. I mean, this is proven. This is science.
I can actually speak to that too. So yeah, and it makes sense, right? Are there differences in us? For sure. But our brains in of themselves, right? Of course, different hormones, right? They do different things in our body. But yeah, cavemen, hunters, gatherer, they believe that society was a matriarchal society for a long time, because women.
Yeah, I've heard that.
Yeah, because the creation of patriarchy didn't happen until domestication of animals and agriculture, because they didn't understand the male's role in reproduction. But here's women birthing, feeding, keeping these children alive. And of course, women need to stay, because that's how they're taking care of the children. So 100% hands down makes a ton of sense. And patriarchy is a construct. So it's, and that has shifted Mojo Dojo Casa House, right?
Mojo Dojo Casa House.
Yeah. And we're not that, like I said, men aren't from Venus or Mars, women aren't from, we're not like, there's not those differences. It's just, can we break down how we've been raised, do the critical message check, which you guys call it, what, self-inspection?
Yeah.
Self-awareness. Yeah, self-awareness. Yeah. And where am I getting this messaging? And do I agree with this messaging still? Does it fit my values? Is this where I want to go? And it all boils down back to that stuff.
Mind blown.
I'm out of words.
All right. What do you want to end on? You probably got like 69 more bullet points that you want to read off. So
is that bumping in my mic? No, I'm good.
Yeah. I mean, I think if I could say anything to the listeners out there, I just want to impress that one, like, don't overthink this stuff. It's not that hard. It's just a skill we're trying to make you aware of, because this stuff is really important when it comes to those relationships that you want to foster and that you want to nourish in your life. You know, and we're not very good at that as men sometimes. And most of it is because we've just never been taught the skills, man. We've never had anybody have these kind of conversations with us before, to where you can really kind of distill it down and think, you know, we go right into the automatic modes that we were raised with, you know. So if you grew up in a household where your dad was a problem solver and jumped into every conversation and told people how to fix it, you may be inclined to do that yourself. And that may be something that you need to check with, you know, your significant other or your close circle of friends. Or this is just ways that you can show up to be more aligned in whatever you've defined as your own personal values, and to make a bigger impact in the relationships that are important to you. That's really all I'm getting at with this.
Good stuff, man.
Yeah, just another tool, because there is a time and a place to problem solve.
Yeah.
I love a good problem to solve.
And it's no different than what we talked about in the fighter squadron too, right? You talk about all the tools that you want to put into a kid's toolkit to make them into a really good fighter pilot, right? That's all we're trying to do. We're just trying to give you guys tools that you can use when you need them, and that you can practice when you need to make you a better man. That's it.
All right. I think that's a pretty good spot to end. You got anything else? Any parting shots? Cass?
Be the change.
You can't see me.
Hey guys, one of the consistent topics we discuss on the Be One Change One podcast is the importance of resiliency, seizing opportunities, and choosing courage over comfort to achieve what is important to you. So if you're an outdoorsman, we would encourage you to explore Sick Bear Outdoors.
That's right. Sick Bear believes in using the symbol of resilience to empower your outdoor adventures and to experience the wildness of life's trails. Sick Bear adopts the bear's approach by fearlessly embracing nature, standing your ground, and courageously facing challenges. Get out of your comfort zone at sickbear.com. That's SICBEAR.com. Visit sickbear.com for all of your individual and family hunting, fishing, or outdoor adventure needs. Thanks for flying with the Be One Change One podcast. If you got something out of this show, then be the one and share it in your circles of influence.
You can be our wingman through our website at www.be1change1.com. That's B and the number 1, change and the number 1.com.
We invite you to be the one and join our fighter squadron on social media at Be1Change1 on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. You can follow us at Paul Roscoe White on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn, as well as Roscoe's website, www.paulroscoewhite.com.
You can email us from the website, and please leave comments, share, and ask questions, or leave ideas of things you would like to discuss on future podcasts. Most importantly, be the one that helps us win the algorithm by leaving a review on whatever platform you're listening on.
Thanks for joining. Until next time, be the one.